This is SEO and steak and margaritas. We always start with SEO and save the best for last. I've been thinking a ton about AI, talking to about it, a ton of people about it. I'd love to get your hot take on it, both in the IT world and the SEO world. What do you know about AI? What do you want to say about it? Are people crazy? Are they getting too excited? Not excited enough?
There's something there. I think it's overblown.
Yeah,
Um,
do tell.
I, it, it- People tend to jump on the bandwagon and get all worked up and over concerned about things that there's something there, but I don't think it's, you know, everyone's getting all worked up about it. And I don't think we're to that point yet. Certainly it can be and is a useful tool. I think we've seen that it is also error prone and not always entirely accurate. I mean, the most well-known of them all, the Chat GPT, it's a very large language model.
Mm-hmm.
And it's collected all this information and can give you a response that seems like it's well written and reasoned, but a lot of the times it's wrong or incomplete. So I think just like anything, like if you're doing research on something, Wikipedia might be a good place to start, but you want to do your own research. Chat GPT might be a good place to start, but you want to do your own research.
It's funny you say that. Some of the reading I was doing this morning was about medical AI and medical, like reading, you know, MRIs or X-rays or whatever. And uh, the general consensus, just whatever article I was reading, was that yeah, this is really great. We can have these things scan, a million MRIs and tell us this information, and then we have to have somebody look at them. So I'm sure it's going to speed the process up. There's probably some easy calls on both ends, right? Like no mass here, right? Mass here. Sort them out. But the thing is, the stakes are really, really high. And until AI is more accurate than a human being, you don't want to risk the tumor being missed on your MRI because they used AI instead of a human being to get it.
Yeah, well, for sure. And the other thing is, uh, we need people that know how to do this stuff. We don't want to just rely exclusively on AI, and then everybody else is a bunch of dopes who doesn't know how to read the X-rays or do everything right. We need people who to look at this stuff and be the experts, and not solely rely on AI.
Yeah, and the other thing is because it's so, I don't know, scary or unknown to people, I think one thing that's helpful is to look at past history. I got two examples that I've been thinking about and chatting a little bit about. One is, the maps, the navigation programs, right? How primitive they were in the beginning and how error prone and how helpful they are now. Still not perfect, but it's not like because they've gotten better and better and super helpful that they've somehow nefariously taken over the world, right? I mean, clearly there's probably a preference for people that advertise and they're more likely to show you a Burger King that's spending money on ads than not. I don't know the answer to that, but it's not like evil AI has taken over navigation. It's forcing us to go through the ghetto when we don't want to or something.
Well, that's a great thing about the maps. There were there's a spot in Hawaii where people follow the GPS and they end up driving their car into the harbor, like happened two or three times. It's like you're relying on this stuff a little too much. Wake up, get your head out of your phone, and look where you're going.
Hmm. Well, and funny you should say that because we have an SEO client that's not horribly far from here. But when you follow Google Maps and go to their place, you end up 7 miles, literally 7 miles out in the country in the middle of farm fields. Ask me how I know. Instead of there. And that's after how many years has the maps, navigation for personal use, consumer use been around? 20 years. Um, it's still making mistakes. So that's one caveat. Um, uh, Trying to remember oh yeah, and the other one is I don't know if you remember this, but back in the old black screen monitor days with the little green letters and the 5.5 inch floppy disk days, it was such a sea change. People were so excited about this new program, which was like a psychoanalytics program, and you could type in your query, "Oh, I'm feeling anxious," and it would come back and say, "Oh, I hear you're feeling anxious. How do you feel about your mother?" And people are like, "Oh my God, this thing's intelligent. It knows what I'm thinking."
I think it's called Eliza.
Yeah, right. Well, there was a psychoanalyst version of Eliza, right? And the first three questions, you're like, "Ooh, what is this?" And then the fourth, you're like, "Jesus Christ, this thing is stupid," right?
I just read something that they compared Eliza to Chat GPT, and people thought Eliza was better in terms of like they Chat GPT, they realized it was AI, and Eliza, um, they thought it was the real deal.
Well,
So
funny you should say that because as I was thinking about ChatGTP, I think it's really helpful to remember it, Liza, because you type in this, and this goes to the notion of are these things really intelligent, right? Are they really thinking on their own? They're not. And that's what people, you might get that weird, hair on the back of your neck standing up when it answers in a way that you didn't expect. But really, if you go back to Eliza and you go, okay, I see how quickly this breaks down, how it's formulaic answers. Well, it takes a lot longer to break down in ChatGTP, at least in the sense that there's a much larger language model and the algorithms are more complicated. But if you stay in there and hack around with it a little bit, try to keep asking it queries, you can see where it starts to fail, where it can't give you specificity, it can't answer with nuance, right? It makes factual errors and it plagiarizes. So early days with that, not that it won't be amazing eventually, right? But it's still early days, A, and B, it's not intelligent. It clearly doesn't think for itself. It's not sentient.
absolutely, use with care.
Use with care. And I think someday it's going to be amazing. Well, like I said, it's kind of amazing now,
It is
but
kind of, yeah, you just
right?
right. It's not a replacement for people doing the work and doing the research. It's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Useful tool.
Yep. 100%. And you mentioned something interesting. You said something a moment ago like um, people were more convinced that this thing was sentient or human, right? That the original guy talking about that was Turing, right?
Yes.
The Turing test, right? And the Turing test is, can this AI fool people into thinking it's human, right?
Right.
And they still use that test. And I suppose there's some uncomfortable analogies to the bell curve of intelligence there, but I think most people of average intelligence can figure out that AI is not human in fairly short order if they want to put the work in.
Yes, sir.
It's fascinating stuff, man. And I mean, you know, working a little bit at all the edges of technology and humanity, I'm sure it's going to change our lives in many ways. I'm just really keen on making sure A, I know what's going on, and B, I can stay ahead of it so don't miss out on opportunities.
Well, that's all big, expensive technology that requires huge data centers, large storage, and huge numbers of processors and power.
Hmm.
We also have our individual technology that is closer to us, such as the computer sitting in front of me and computer sitting in front of you. I believe you got a new computer.
I did just a few weeks ago.
Well, my lovely wife, I was wondering what to get her for Christmas, and she's like, "I don't need anything. I don't want anything. It's fine." And then one day she asked me, she goes, when I unplug the power cord from my laptop, the screen goes dim and the battery only lasts 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, I know what you need. Her laptop's probably, boy, it seems like we just bought it a couple years ago. It's probably 7 years old.
Hmm.
She didn't do a lot with it. She keeps a couple of spreadsheets and she likes having DVDs and Blu-rays, and then she'll like rip them to her computer because she likes actually having the files. Like,
Oh yeah.
you can just stream that. Well, she didn't want to hear it. She wants to rip it to her computer.
Right.
So anyway, I get her a new fancy laptop for Christmas, and she's like, oh, she loves it, and she's getting all her stuff on it. Well, she takes these Blu-rays and she puts them on her computer. Then she runs them through a program called Handbrake, which takes the file size and just squishes it down so she can fit everything on her phone.
Hmm.
And this process used to take her like 3 hours, and now it takes 30 minutes.
Wonderful.
So I guess where I'm going with this
Hmm.
is there's lots of technology all around us. Just you've got your computer, I got my computer now. She has her fancy new laptop, and boy, the difference between a 7-year-old laptop doing something, 3 hours to 30 minutes, and if she's doing this all the time. So, and plus you can unplug it and the screen doesn't go dark.
Hmm.
So smiles all around, upgrade your technology. It's worth it. Your website is a piece of technology too.
That is true.
And if you got that 5, 6, 7-year-old website, boy, the improvements that have happened over the last several years, that there's a lot of stuff that could be improved and changed. And, imagine if you got that benefit of something, like that big of an improvement going from 3 hours to 30 minutes, or your website works that much better in the search engines on mobile devices, whatever.
That's a wonderful point. And that's the technology side. The other thing is when a car model first comes out, it looks really cool. I can't remember what the name of the Dodge Durango. is like this SUV that Dodge made. And I think it first came out like, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that. When it first came out and I saw it, I just went, wow, that's amazing. It looks so futuristic and cool. I want to get one of those someday. Now I look at one and I go, what a piece of junk. That thing looks antiquated. It ticks down the road. Half the people that own them have like a black fender on a red car. It's just like, oh my God. Well, that's exactly in line with your website idea, not just technology, but the appearance, right? People's taste change in colors, the fashions and trends change, the way the layouts go. And then the layouts work differently with different technology, right? Smartphone, iPads, laptops, desktops. So you're absolutely right. I don't know, back in the day, we used to think a website lasted 5 years. I don't think the technology is current or cutting edge in 5 years anymore. I think it's maybe 2.5 years, maybe less.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you want to be on the leading edge, it's 2 or 3 years, right?
Hmm.
5 years is probably average, and beyond that, that's where you're a laggard, right? You're falling behind the times.
Yeah, 5 years, you got a black fender on a red car and it's working, but the people that care about that stuff are going to notice.
Well, your technology is important, your website's important, security in this day and age is important too.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so after the first of the year, I got an email from Network Services Group, which is my other company, and it said, click here for the update on your 401k plan. And it had like a QR code in the email. And I'm like, this is clearly a scam. I'm the administrator of the plan, so I know it didn't come from us. I should probably send an email to the rest of the team because somebody who hadn't been participating just signed up. I don't want anybody clicking on this nonsense, even though the team's smart and should be aware. But so I reminded them. I said, hey, I just got this email. It's got our logo. It's got this QR code, but didn't come from us. Don't click on it. Well, my chief scientist, Autumn Mahoney, took that email and dug into the headers and the footers and all this stuff and figured out this rat's nest of how this hacker managed to send out this email. It started with Adobe. Adobe's this huge corporation that should have smart people in charge of their technology and especially their DNS and their security settings. And they had this there's something called an SPF record, which basically says if you receive an email from Adobe and it doesn't come from these specific places, then it's spam or forgery, right? Well, they didn't have it set up correctly. There was some loophole in there that allowed these people to send out that email to us claiming that it was from Adobe. So that should be your first clue. You're looking at it. Well, why is my 401k statement from Network Services Group coming from Adobe? But a lot of people aren't going to look at that. Well, she didn't stop there. Then, she followed the QR code back to some server that ended up being some cleaning service in Kuwait. And they had a website. And guess what the website was running? WordPress. And guess what? Somebody hacked into it and put all the viruses and stuff. So when you scan the QR code and it goes to this Kuwaiti cleaning company who has a WordPress site that wasn't maintained, it's got all. And so she's filling out abuse forms, and like basically everybody, like the hosting company that had these guys in Kuwait said, "Oh, we're going to clean this up. We're going to take care of this." Somebody else was involved. Yeah, we're going to clean this up. Of course, we never hear anything back from Adobe.
Right.
Well, I guess where I'm going with this is we have a pretty good team, pretty smart. Your security and with stuff like that is in good hands with us. Over the years, we get people like that. Hey, we're going to get this web designer who draws nice colors and everything, and we're going to have them host our website. And they want us to transfer the DNS to them. I said, well, it's your DNS. We can certainly do that. But I'm telling you, putting a web designer in front of your DNS is a bad idea because they're going to break your email. They're going to do the Adobe thing with the SPF record, not have it filled out correctly, and it's not going to end well. So that stuff is important, and it's important to have somebody who's smart and diligent and knows how to do it for real in charge of it.
Man, I just love that. The theme of today is the overwhelming, wonderful promise of technology, tempered by all the cautions that you have to have because of that technology at the same time. So you got to stay sober about the whole thing.
Yeah.
This conversation makes me hungry, which means it's time to turn our attention to steak and margaritas. What do you got?
Well, there hasn't been Well, actually, I
Been a
was going to
while
say there
since we've
hasn't been,
talked about this.
yeah, there hadn't been a lot going on in terms of margaritas, but
Mm,
you and I went to Five Steakhouse.
we did indeed.
That's in Plymouth, right? That's the
Canton, Plymouth, one of those two.
no, yeah. Um, and our favorite bartender made us delicious, spicy margaritas.
If I'm not mistaken, they got a little spicier as time went on.
I think he got sick of us complaining about it, so he tried to outspice us.
Right. And he's not just going jalapeno anymore. He's doing the red pepper flakes and everything.
So yeah, we've been there enough that like I'll call and they recognize my voice. I mean, we don't go there 2 or 3 times a year, but we make such a big show of it when we do that they all recognize us and get us a special place at the bar. And he knows, man, he's going out and like buying cases of limes and lemons and he's squeezing them like for 5 hours before we get there. Because we were complaining in the past, it's like his margarita per hour. Like he'd make like 0.75 margaritas per hour because he had to go back and squeeze all the limes and stuff. Like, dude, you need to up your pace. So now he prepares it all ahead of time.
That is true. And he never scoffs at us for our choice of tequila, which is a good move if part of your income comes from tips.
Yes, sir. Have you been
Yes.
scoffed at for your choice of tequila?
I don't know if I talked about it on this show or not, but I know I did share that with you. I was out in Seattle not too long ago, and I went to this wonderful bar in Renton, Washington, which was very neighborhoody and a little hippie-ish and really cool in many ways. But my friend and I were, have muscles and short hair, and I'm not sure we exactly fit the crowd. But anyway, we started talking to the bartender and asking what tequila they had. And they made all kinds of suggestions, mostly in the realm of Jose Cuervo and Patron for our margaritas, neither of which I'm particularly fond of. And I saw that tall, brown, beautiful bottle of Don Julio 1942 sitting on the bottle rack. And I said, would you kindly make us your best margarita with that tequila? And I was openly scoffed at, openly. And I'm like, how do you scoff at somebody for ordering? I literally said this, how do you scoff at us for ordering our the tequila we like in our margaritas? And they're like, that's sipping tequila. It's I can't remember their words, not wasteful, but something like that, right? It's wasteful to put that in a margarita.
Extravagant.
Extravagant. And I'm like, well, everybody has an opinion. My opinion is I like my margaritas with really good tequila in them, and that happens to be one I like. And so begrudgingly, they made us a couple margaritas with that. And they were not quite as good as the ones we had had slightly before that at a fancy steakhouse. But they were half the price of the ones at the fancy steakhouse. So we swallowed our pride and we swallowed those margaritas. But I will say this, if you're going to compare those margaritas with the ones we had at Five recently, those margaritas were probably didn't break an 8. And I would say the ones that we had at Five were certainly worthy of discussion in the 9 realm. And what about the steaks we had? We had 2 kinds of steak at that visit to Five.
I
We
believe
had
you are correct.
we had an intentional A5 Wagyu and an unintentional Angus ribeye.
Because I think we had ordered the prime and they gave us the choice or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep. And it wasn't bad. I mean, no complaints, right?
No.
Yeah. Any other time we have it wasn't a 10.0, but it was good. It was a good wholesome steak, well made. They had their zip sauce there, which makes every steak taste better.
It's delightful.
And the Wagyu was just buttery and incredible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no complaints. We didn't get the wedge that time. I think we got to get the wedge next time we go there.
Yeah, you talked me out of it. You're like, we don't need that. We got Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, I was thinking they were okay. I don't like it when they take the Brussels sprouts apart, so it's just a bunch of leaves. I like them when
Oh.
they cut them in half and they're nice and crunchy.
Well, the reason that you didn't want the wedge, if memory serves, is because our last outing, we went to Bodie's and they put like the biggest ass chunks of pork belly on their wedge. And we're just like, okay, if we
Yep.
get a wedge anywhere else, it's going to be a disappointment. So we need to let that memory fade away a little bit before we order a wedge again.
100%, 100%. Well, at some point, I know it's a burden for us in terms of time on the road, but I think we got to go back and do a confirmation visit at Bodie's just to make sure it's as good as we thought it was the first time.
So speaking of being scoffed at,
Yes, sir.
do you
I'm all
remember a
ears.
time that we were down in Florida with our good friend Charlie, and we went to this place in Naples called the Continental,
Oh, do I remember?
And I think we had breakfast, we'd had lunch, and now we're there. It's like fairly early in the day, still like 3:30 or 4 p.m. So we're not real hungry, but this place is supposed well known for steaks and whatever else. So we had to try something. So I turned to the bartender and I said, I don't want you to think any less of us. And he goes, that wouldn't be possible, sir. But the point was, we ordered one steak and had him slice it up so we could each have a couple of bites of steak without stuffing ourselves.
And it was a pretty darn good steak. And not only that, but he was making some of those fancy house cocktails, including, if I remember correctly, an espresso martini that was pretty freaking good, or espresso margarita, something like that.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that evening, that afternoon very fondly. We had a wonderful steak. It was warm out. There's kind of a courtyard there, so you could people watch. It's quite a lovely experience, despite the fact that he denigrated our very existence. What a wonderful nostalgic moment. Thank you for sharing that. All right, sir. This has been SEO and Steak and Margaritas for Friday, January 12th, if I'm not mistaken. Thanks for your sharing those thoughts,
Yes, sir.
and we will talk again soon.